Hey everyone, welcome to another class of high school faith formation. So when putting this curriculum together, I knew I wanted to do at least one class on a subject that if you're a high school, you've probably never heard of. Even if maybe you're an adult, you've never heard of this. But I actually ended up doing two classes on this subject, which is called typology. Now, typology. It's simply the study of people, objects, or events in the Old Testament that we see paralleled in the New Testament. So, that's typology. It's studying something called a type. Now, a type, it's that's the basically noun in the Old Testament, right? So person, object, event in the Old Testament, which foreshadows people or events, whatever, in the New Testament. In Romans chapter 5, for example, we see St. Paul, he's writing, and he calls Adam a type. When he says, up to the time of the law, sin was in the world, well, that part's not as important, but he says, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who did not sin after the fall of Adam, who is the type of the one who was to come. So the type, he was the Old Testament parallel of the one who was to come. Now, the Greek word type, I'm sorry, the word type, it comes from the Greek tupos. And tupos, it's like an imprint that you see on an object after the object has been struck. Like a dent in a car, for example, or like a pillow that's dented once you punch it. That's what the word tupos would be used for. And the fulfillment or the parallel of an Old Testament type, it's called an antitype, from the Greek antetopos. So, for example, we know Adam, he saw he was naked and he had to put on clothes after eating from the tree in the Garden of Eden, which cast mankind into sin. Okay, Jesus was stripped of his clothing before being crucified on his tree, which saved mankind from sin. So, opposites, right? So, the antitype of Adam putting on clothes in the New Testament would be Jesus being stripped of his garments. And the type for Jesus being crucified on the wood of a tree would be Adam eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And therefore, because of this, Jesus is called the new Adam. Another example we can see of this is it's found in the story of Jonah the prophet. Um, and the story of Jonah the prophet, it is if you might have heard of it, it's simply God. There was a prophet in the Old Testament. God, he told him to go to a certain city, Nineveh, and let everyone know that they were, God was upset with them, but it's okay. Here's how to fix it, right? And Jonah, because the sin it was rough. So he decided just to go like the opposite way, pretty much. And a large fish came and like swallowed him. He died, and but was later, brought back to life. Um, so that's the story of Jonah, right? And Jesus, he said, just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. And the connection, it's pretty, I like to think it's pretty obvious. Being in the heart of the earth 3 days, 3 nights. And Jesus, he adds, he says, there is something greater than Jonah here, because Jesus is the greatest prophet. And we see the phrase something greater about three times in this chapter. Verse 6 of Matthew 12, it says, Christ, he's talking about the Jewish temple, but he adds that something greater than the temple is here, because Jesus is the greatest priest. He mentions King Solomon And he says that there is something greater than Solomon here, because he is the greatest of all wise men. Um, Now, in addition to small little parallels, both Solomon and Jesus, they both rode a donkey, which very unheard of for a great king. But both rode a donkey. They're both descendants of David. They're both kings of Israel, etc. Um, Now there's certainly um, a lot more parallels. Another one I want to look at. It can actually we can link it to. It's an Old Testament story, and we can link it to two characters in the New Testament. So Joseph, you might have seen that it's like a DreamWorks movie. I think it's called like Joseph, King of Dreams. That guy, the one who his brothers were, um, I don't know, they're kind of just envious of him, and they ended up because of how envious they were, they like sold him into slavery. Um, but then he ended up being second in command of Egypt. So he can be seen as a type of Christ, of Jesus, but also we can see him as a type of Joseph in the New Testament, because both had fathers named Jacob. Both they were given messages in a dream, and both at some point they had to travel to Egypt. Another one, I know I'm going through them pretty quickly, just because I don't know. I don't want to harp on it too much. I feel like a lot of these they're pretty obvious once you explain them. So the Old Testament prophet Elijah or Elisha, he was considered one of the greatest Old Testament prophets, and we can find a lot of parallels when we read about his antitype, Saint John the Baptist. Both wore what were referred to as hairy garments. Um, at one point, Elijah he had to kind of just fade into the background, just kind of disappear, so that his successor, the one who he was training to take over after he was gone, Elisha or Elisha, people say, um, so he had to fade away, so to speak. And John the Baptist, he says that Jesus must increase and I must decrease. So yeah, that works too, right? Um, Someone greater is coming. I'll fade into the back. You must follow them now. And I mean, a pretty obvious one. Jesus, he literally calls John Elijah, the one who is to come. So that's yeah. Now the quick one. This is gonna be a little bit longer, but I want to look at some parallels between the New Testament story of Jesus calming the storm and the Old Testament Psalm number 107. So in Luke chapter 8, verse 22, we read, "One day Jesus got into a boat with his disciples and said, let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they set sail. It's all right. And Psalm 107, verse 23 says, "Some went off to sea in ships." So, I mean, I'm not going to just make an argument saying, "Oh, look at this perfect parallel. They both went to the sea." Kind of weak, right? Matthew 8, it says, "Suddenly a violent storm came upon the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by waves, but Jesus was asleep. The apostles, they came and they woke him and said, 'Lord, save us. We are perishing.'" And verse 26 of the psalm says, "They rose up to the heavens, sank to the depths. Their hearts trembled at the danger." Luke chapter 8, verse 24 says, "He awakened, rebuked the winds and the waves, and there was a calm." And the psalm says, "In their distress they cried to the Lord who brought them out of danger. He hushed the storms to silence. The waves of the sea were stilled." And Mark chapter 4, we read, "Then he asked them, 'Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?' They were filled with great awe and said to one another, 'Who then is this whom even wind and sea obey?'" And the psalm says, "They rejoiced that the sea grew calm, that God brought them to the harbor they longed for." So, first of all, what's the point? It's like, okay, cool, they're parallels. Wow. Um, well, pretty obvious one I would say is, wow, a what a beautiful thing that we see such fulfillment, not even fulfillment, because it's not necessarily a prophecy, but it's just an event that happened in the Old Testament that is perfectly mirrored in a way in the New. But there's more to it. So Saint Paul, he's writing about the Old Testament, and he says these things happened to them, in the Old Testament as a tupai, as an example, and they have been written down as a warning to us upon whom the end of the ages has come. So a warning, or kind of like a foreshadowing, right? Well, if all these past events happened as a foreshadowing, what is, or what was everything leading toward? According to Pope, is the former Pope, Benedict the 16th, in his book Jesus of Nazareth, the cosmos was created not that there might be multiple things in heaven and earth, but that there might be a space for the covenant, for the loving yes between God and his human respondent. Now that's in like part 2, chapter 4. Just so you know, if you need a source. But anyway, um, so all ancient history led to this one moment, the establishment of a new covenant, so that mankind could reply with a resounding yes to what Christ was offering. Um, and yeah, as we saw, um, there are a lot of or multiple New Testament authors. They were showing this beautiful connection between the symbols of the old and the recreation of them in the new. And St. Paul, at one point he's writing, he even kind of gets annoyed with his readers because they don't understand the connection that he's trying to make with this typology. And he says, son though he was, Jesus, he learned obedience from what he suffered, and when he was perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who follow him, declared by God high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. About this we have much to say, and it's hard to explain this order of Melchizedek. It's difficult because you've become sluggish in hearing. You're just kind of lazy. You don't really care anymore. You should be able to teach the stuff by now, but we just have to teach like the basics repeatedly to you. And I would, I'm not, I truly, I assure you, I have no particular person in mind, but I see that with students each year. People where you just kind of have to teach the bare basics, and not necessarily, you know, your fault. You, presuming you're a student, not necessarily your fault. Just I don't know, bad teachers in the past, but um, yeah, I don't know. St. Paul, his words really echo here. But what I want to point out, what I want to look at, is this Melchizedek. So who is this Melchizedek, right? So next year, I have, in my second year of classes, I have 4 classes on the reality of the Eucharist as taught by Catholic faith, as taught by philosophy, by science, by um, biblical Greek, all of it. So very detailed. But simply for now, I just want to share, um, share a really simple explanation of this Melchizedek person, because as you can guess, he is related to the Eucharist. So the Eucharist, we can trace it to the time of the Jewish forefather Abraham. We can trace it all the way back there, right? So Abraham, he took 318 men at one point, and he goes and he conquers some kings they had stolen from the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And after he returned, he was greeted, we read, by a king. And it says, Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. Now, up until this point, there's been no mention. All of a sudden, just there's this person, this king, and he brings bread and wine. So we have no history. We don't know his lineage. We don't know where he's from. Nothing. Well, the offering of bread and wine by this mysterious high priest, it's made clear by St. Paul in the seventh chapter of his seventh chapter of his letter to the Hebrews. He says, "This Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High, his name first means righteous king, and he was also king of Salem or Shalem, that is king of peace." Now, Shalem, that Hebrew word for peaceful. So, king of peace, it makes sense, right? Because of the Hebrew there. And he adds, without mother or father or ancestry, without a beginning of days, end of life, thus made to resemble the Son of God. He remains a priest forever. So he's drawing this connection here of this mysterious high priest who brought bread and wine. And in the Old Testament, Jesus is shown to be the new high priest. Now, quickly, Old Testament priests, what they would do, they would offer sacrifices for sins. In Hebrews chapter 7, it says when there's a change of priesthood, there must be a change of law as well. So he's saying this to show that there's a new law must now be fulfilled. Because there's been this change of priesthood. Christ is the high priest. And we see this happen in the Gospel of Mark, for example. Jesus, he says that the wine he's holding is his blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. So he fulfilled this old covenant. And this old covenant, we see it take place when Moses, he takes lamb's blood, and he ordered the people to see the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you. And then I just have a little quote. Not sure why. I mean, I could make a connection, but it's just kind of extra detail. But anyway, lastly, so we see the fulfillment of the Jewish sacrifice. We see it portrayed by the death of Christ. So in the laws of Moses, Jews, they had to sacrifice animals to atone for sins. Like Leviticus chapter 4, we can see it. And when St. Paul, he's explaining this law, and he says, since the law has only a shadow of the good things to come, so sacrificing the Old Testament lamb, it was a shadow of the good things to come, and not the, it does not the very image of them, he says. It can never make perfect those who come to worship by the same sacrifices that they offer each year. So basically, you can make the same sacrifice over and over and over. It doesn't make you perfect. It is impossible, he says, that the blood of bulls and goats take away sins. Now, all right, I'm going to do a quick, rapid fire typology on baptism. I'm jumping back in the typology part. So, all right, Exodus chapter 14, we read, "Then Moses stretched out his hands over the sea, and the Lord turned the sea into dry ground. The waters were split so that the Israelites entered into the midst of the sea on dry land." So they were, saved by walking, by going through this water. And 1 Peter chapter 3, the New Testament says, "Put to death in the flesh, Jesus was brought to life in the Spirit. He went to preach to the spirits in prison who had once been disobedient, while God patiently waited in the days of Noah during the building of the ark, in which a few persons were saved through water. And this prefigured baptism, which saves you now." So he mentions Noah. People in the ark, people were saved through water. But of course, with Moses as well, we see people being saved by walking through that water. So church fathers, they're my absolute favorite. Now the early Christians, they agreed that history was centered on Christ. All history before the birth of Jesus pointed, to him, and all that came thereafter it points to his glorious return. St. Augustine, he said in the Old Testament, the New Testament is concealed, and in the New Testament, the Old is revealed. Now, okay, there's a little thing. I threw this in here simply to it's very much off topic, I'll admit, but just really to show the validity, the importance of baptism, and to kind of scold any parents whoever just get their or who have ever gotten their child baptized simply because it's what like grandma wanted, right? Because doing that is actually very dangerous, and it's very selfish, and very ignorant. But I don't want this to necessarily be my opinion or coming just from me. So let's see what other people have said. So in the 4th century, so the 300s, there was a man. He loudly declared that the Holy Spirit was and is God. Um, he was defending that aspect of the Trinity. And this man, Saint Gregory of Nazianzus, he wrote a lot of works on this topic. And in one of these works, he talks about his sister's baptism. He says she recently had received the benefit of spiritual purification or catharsis. He says a second life, which we have all of us received from God. And he continues. He says that Christians who get their children baptized, just because it's I don't know, tradition, they don't take time to learn about the sacrament. They submit their children to death, not new life. He says, I will not endure, after having been taught the faith, to be educated as a faithless man, to go down into the waters of baptism as one about to be made complete, and to come up unfinished, to be baptized as one who lives, and to be killed in the water like a stillborn baby, receiving death along with birth. So, yeah, like I said, I just want to throw that in there, just to show the reality of blindly having a child baptized it's a crime. But just one last quote from him, because it's kind of, I don't know, triumphant. Good way to finish this up. In a very wonderfully sarcastic way, St. Gregory, he says, into what were you baptized? Into the Father, lovely, but still Jewish. Into the Son, lovely, no longer Jewish, but not yet complete. Into the Holy Spirit, excellent, this is complete. So the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, was it just into these, or also some common name that they share? Yeah, a common name. What was it? Obviously, that of God. So next class, we're going to investigate the Old Testament to see if we can see traces and types of Mary. We're going to see if we can find Mary in the Old Testament. On my little notes, I have it that we're doing an activity. Obviously, we can't really do that, but so yeah, thank you to everyone. I appreciate all of you, and may God be with you, God be upon you, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you.